Wow, great to be here. So Sammeli Sammalkorpi is indeed my name, CEO, Co-Founder of Sievo, but more importantly for this audience, Tuta Freshman 98, happily served in the board of Prodeko 2000 in the capacity of host, isäntä, and proud Prodeko alumni, Tuta alumni, of course. Actually, great to be here at the lecture hall A. I've fallen asleep so many times on those seats that my key target for this discussion is try to keep you awake for the next 20-30 minutes. Let's see how we succeed with that. Also, I feel I'm here amongst friends, really. Prodeko and Tuta years had a big impact on me and helped me become who I am. So really grateful and proud to be here and hopefully give something back to the society, community, which is so close to my heart. The topic today is navigating responsibility and growth. I'll start by giving very quick context. What is Sievo? What we do as a company? Basically, we provide, as mentioned, procurement analytics SaaS software, basically helping large enterprises, large companies to capture their procurement data, invoices, POs, external data, transform that into better decisions. Traditionally, it was a lot about creating cost reductions and savings, but quite fittingly for the theme of today, it's increasingly also about helping large enterprises to reduce carbon emissions, create more diverse supplier base, be sustainability overall. There's a lot of great entrepreneurial success stories coming out of, let's say, Tuta Prodeko family. Sievo may be the best one you've never heard of. So basically, we bootstrapped our growth to 25 million euros over the last 18 years, actually. Completely self-financed, stable growth. It's like sort of 30% every year. If you have a good year, the growth rate is 28. If you have bad, it's 27. So I've been thinking as a CEO, I could just relax. It's going to be 27 or 28 anyway, so no matter what I do. So I think that's good. That's a good position to be in. What is quite unique with us, and I think it's relevant for today's discussion as well, we are serving these large enterprises. So you definitely will recognize many of the logos of our customers. And if there's a logo up there, we serve the customer globally. All regions, all businesses, all of their procurement activities, which is, of course, very privileged position because I can have discussions with procurement leaders in these organizations, supply chain leaders, and try to understand how they try to cope with COVID, Ukraine, climate change, and of course, then figure out what role Sievo could play in helping these large enterprises. Now, the theme is navigating responsibility and growth. Sort of the growth part would be easy. We've been bootstrapping from 0 to 25 million without anybody really recognizing. There will be a lot of great stories about that. But I guess the question I want to more address today is how to do that and still have a positive impact on the world. I guess myself personally, all Sievonians, we feel the urge, okay, we want to leave a positive impact on the world. What's the point of all of this if that's not the case? But when responsible companies are being discussed, the typical examples are companies like Compensate or Upright Project, which have been designed and architected to create a positive impact. And huge congrats for those companies and founders there. But that's not Sievo. We do procurement analytics. It's not exactly a company that's designed to create a positive impact. Or you can take Patagonia, kind of that has very strong values, but they are in a position where they can serve certain consumer segment that resonates very strongly with those values and create business out of that. Great, but again, not us. We have 5,000 potential customers in the world. We can't narrow that segment down to those that really kind of think strongly about sustainability. Or if you take an example of Exxon, which is really at the center of huge transformation that needs to happen. There's potential huge positive impact there. But we, Sievo, we are doing boring procurement analytics stuff. There's no way we can have positive impact in this scale. And the second part of the paradox is that if we listen what our customers want us to do, or the stakeholders or Sievonians, it boils down to, do you recycle at the office? Can you reduce your electricity? Can you, let's say, make employees kind of donate one day a year for sustainability cause? Yes, it's all nice. But honestly, is it going to be a big positive impact? It's the compliance part that Kaisa sort of mentioned. Tick in the box, let's have party. It doesn't work. If we want to have an impact on the world, we need to go beyond that tick box exercise and at the same time realize we are just a middle-sized growing procurement software company. Now, when I was putting together this presentation, I realized to my surprise, we've been actually quite successful. There's 3 cases I could speak for hours about how we've made a positive impact. There's how we've helped our customers to react to COVID. There's about CO2, how we are helping our clients, large enterprises, to reduce CO2 emissions. And then there's the procure for peace. Today I'll start and I mostly focus on the procure for peace. And it's a very relevant, timely story. And sort of its story how we ended up creating an international volunteer organization on an ad hoc basis. So, how it started. It's February 24th, Thursday morning. We all woke up to a new reality. Putin's administration had decided to attack and started attacked war against Ukraine. War in Ukraine, war in Europe at our times. It's quite horrible. Of course, in Sievo also we kind of had to react and think, how does this change our situation? First thing is to kind of do internal communication. 8:53 on that Thursday morning, we posted in our Slack where we condemn this horrible attack, but at the same time we want to state that we don't condemn all Russians. There's a lot of people working in Sievo as well who have fled Russia because they disapprove of the Putin administration. So we made that statement. Then of course we also started to think whether we would like to make an external public statement about our position. And whenever there's kind of business strategy decisions, I feel that company management teams sort of can hold certain responsibility to make those calls. But when it's more about these moral responsibility decisions, we strongly believe that management team doesn't have higher moral than the entire company. So we need to ask and debate this across all Sievonians. So we had a debate on the Slack whether we should take a statement or whether we should not take the statement. The end result was that people were slightly leaning towards, yes, we should make a statement. Those who thought that we shouldn't, were stating that because we haven't done anything concrete, we shouldn't make a statement, it would be hypocrite. Anyways, we decided to make the statement. I think we did it on Friday. Then again, nothing unusual here. A lot of companies made these statements. We made it as well. It didn't really sort of break news barrier. We made the statement, we got total 2 comments to that. But the other one was interesting. It's from Tim. He represents the Ukrainians in Finland Association. And they had basically sort of already gathered some help to be shipped to the Ukraine. And he was reaching out to us, great moral support, can you really, really help? Then we start to exchange and see how could we help. So then what happened basically over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, is that I learned from Tim that what they need is medical supplies. I tried to help there as well, I completely failed. But also they would need logistics support. They have the stuff in Helsinki, they need to ship that to Ukraine. At that point I realized, for the last 20 years I've been active in procurement, logistics communities internationally, but also in Finland. There might be a chance that I can help these guys to get the logistics organized from Helsinki to Ukraine. So I reached out to a few people on Saturday, in LinkedIn, publicly, also privately and so forth. And the response was amazing. In less than 6 hours, I had 10 proposals from logistics companies, from the large international ones to one guy and a van company, basically stating, we'll deliver. Tell me how much you want to pick up, where you want it delivered, we'll take it. And it was really sort of amazing moment. God damn, this society works. Despite all the kind of speech about, let's say, hate speech and stuff like that, first time in my life, I at least experienced such a communal willingness to help and advance a positive cause. So at that moment, I felt pretty sort of positively surprised how this society really works. Then somebody actually advised me that I should tell this story, tell this playbook in LinkedIn with the hope that, let's say, other people in similar positions like me, good connections to procurement logistics sort of network, would do the same in different countries or regions. So I did that. I think on Sunday I put this up and said, hey, this is what we did. Perhaps you can copy past this in your country or region or whatever. What happened already in Sunday, this guy Rohit, he's a chief procurement officer at a large mid-sized UK company that I barely knew, probably met him somewhere and we were LinkedIn connections, said that basically he's been doing a bit similar stuff from UK and he actually knows people in Ukraine, so perhaps we could team up and figure out what's going to happen. And he had the same reflection as I do. The global European procurement community really wants to help. And I'm pretty sure all of you had this feeling, how can I help here? But it was also unclear, okay, besides donating money, what's really helpful? And then, of course, if you want to understand how to help, you probably need to discuss with the people who are on the ground and potentially need the help. And Rohit had those connections. So probably all of us have had way too many Zoom calls, Teams calls in the last couple of years. And probably most of them are not really very exciting or don't leave a permanent mark on your brains. But there is a Zoom call that I knew already when having, shit, this is a call that I will never forget. And it was a call that we set up with people in Ukraine. On the top row, you see Volodymyr, you see Olena, Olga, and actually in the big picture you have Olena. It was late Monday, I had worked throughout the weekend, long day, I was going pretty tired of the meeting. But then I realized Olena is taking the meeting, it's not an office setting. She had to drop out of the meeting because the airstrike alarm started to sound. A motivational Zoom meeting does exist. At that point, of course, all of us who were sort of active in the movement felt we need to sort of really help. The debrief we had with Rohit and Lance was like, there's actually war going on there. It came really close. That was day 4, that was Monday. On Tuesday, day 5, we launched that on Tuesday, a Procure for Peace organization. I'll explain on the next slide what it actually does. Website was live, the LinkedIn community was gathering momentum. We had a lot of European procurement leaders, like more than 1,000. It's not the number, but these are really the people who have connections to pretty much all manufacturing companies globally. We had the Ukrainian counterparts engaged, we had a structured meeting rhythm in place. We also learned the role we can play and cannot play. We can't help the military. At some point, I got this list of all the weapons that the Ukrainian army needs. I went to my spouse and said, do you want your husband to become an arms trader? we dismissed that idea. But in Ukraine, there's a lot of these local defense organizations that have sort of self-organized movements that we can help. But it's also very confusing. On day 5, nobody had an idea whether this war will last 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years. What is the time horizon against which we should organize this movement? It's more clear now, but it was far from clear from back then. Now, if you look at the day 71, what Procure for Peace has become is sort of a connection between the Ukrainians and the global, primarily European, but global procurement community. On the right-hand side, you have these Ukrainian self-organized defense groups and humanitarian support groups. Interesting, in Ukraine, you have a lot of these self-organized groups, like Lauttasaaren suojeluskunta, but somewhere in the Ukraine. And they have actually the needs, they know what they need, but they also have a lot of money nowadays because so much donations have been flowing in. But they have absolutely no kind of capabilities, competence in doing, let's say, industrial scale sourcing and purchasing. It's Lauttasaaren suojeluskunta at the end of the day. It's not like you have CPOs there, kind of very much. Then at the same time, on the left-hand side, you have the European global and procurement community who have capabilities in kind of industrial scale sourcing, purchasing, who have willingness to help, and they have all the right connections. And the Procure for Peace tries to kind of match the demand and sort of supply, both in terms of information exchange, but then actually facilitating concrete flow of goods. If you look at some of the examples of what has happened, when it's about, let's say, large volume purchases, we really try to figure out there's this organization that needs something and who could supply that and make the matchmaking in our sort of community. And as one example, in one transaction, close to 500,000 medical kits ended up being supplied to Ukraine. But then there's also a lot of these sort of more small-scale requirements. A small organization somewhere needs these fabrics that you can turn into protective gear. What we've done is that sort of we've verified suppliers that can supply this kind of goods to Ukraine who have manufacturing capacity. We provide pricing and connections and so forth, and then the Ukrainians can use that as a starting point to actually sort of do the purchasing. At the end of the day, it turned out to harness the energy of the thousands of willing individuals is hard to do. What we've now done is that we have a sort of relatively solid volunteer organization. Also, I think Antti Suorsa is here, so huge credits to Antti. He's been one of the key persons driving the sourcing activities. But then also we have a lot of, let's say, large organizations, procurement consulting companies typically, who have put 10-person team to help this activity. So we've identified the sort of different players and how they can help. So that's one way sort of we, as let's say global procurement community, we as Sievo, myself personally, found a way to sort of help here. And in terms of sort of certain lessons that I think upon reflection I've been able to kind of take to myself and I'd like to share here as well is that the first one is that with great powers comes great responsibility. And this has been a long personal learning journey for me. I'm originally a shy, mathematically talented guy from northern Finland. And I'm a fan of low hierarchy, high autonomy. It took a long time for me to realize that actually I am in some kind of position of power, and then it's my responsibility to decide how I use the whatever luck, talent, connections, power that I have. I can use it to optimize my own taxing, or then I can try to make a positive impact for people close to me, for Sievonians, for the wider society. And I think that's really, but a lot of you guys are in positions of power or will be. I think it's up for you, individually, each of you, to decide how do you want to use those powers. For good, for neutral, for bad. I don't know what is the correct answer for you guys, but I think there's a way I can test what is the correct answer for myself. And this is a great decision-making framework. You may have heard that Jeff Bezos has this sort of decision framework that whenever there's a big decision, he thinks, on my deathbed, will I regret that decision or not? And he uses that as a trick to decide what to be done now. There's two challenges with that framework. First of all, it's very hard for me to think what I will think about in the deathbed. I still hope there's few years between me dying. And secondly, it's very difficult to operationalize. I need to die several times to figure out what I feel. But this is much better kind of decision-making than from TDAT. I'm lucky also in the sense that I have 3 kids. The oldest one, she is 15, so she is a teenage daughter. And any of you in the same position as I am know that for a parent to get attention or even approval from a teenage daughter is next to impossible. It's very rare sort of resource to have that. So whenever there's a kind of, if I go to home to dinner, and I say to my daughter that, yes, our growth rate went from 27 to 28. That's amazing. We closed these new deals and what else? The typical business bullshit. I tell to her that, okay, we are figuring out how the large enterprises can manage their supply chain crises. But I go to home and say, hey, we are helping large enterprises to reduce CO2 or help Ukraine. Wow. I get approval, I get attention. And I can test it. I can go home and draw the idea, and then I get the feedback. Is it a good idea or bad idea? So if you don't have a kid, do one just for being in the position to do teenage daughter approval test. I surely recommend. It comes with heavy cost otherwise, I must warn you. And then if you want to loan my teenage daughter, she's still looking for summer job, so I can rent her for a week. We can do e-auction later today to see where the pricing lands. Yeah. The second learning, I think Kaisa also alluded to this. There's an opportunity in each crisis. Of course, these are huge human suffering crises, the climate change, the war in Ukraine, the COVID and so forth. But I really do believe that if you are prepared to do the right thing, not looking at the short-term KPI metrics, but really, if you are responsible to do the right thing for the long term, you will see those opportunities in the crisis. That's how you can both, I do believe, you can both have a positive impact on the world, but at the same time, in case you are interested in business outcomes, I think that helps you to create the right business outcome in the long term as well. I did discuss about the Procure for Peace. Let me very briefly provide these other examples as well. I don't need to educate you on why the climate change is the challenge that we need to solve, our generation needs to solve. Probably you're also fully aware that large enterprises are in the key role. They are responsible for a large share of the CO2 emissions globally. What you perhaps did not know is that if you look at most large enterprises, most of their CO2 is kind of embedded in the goods and services that they purchase. So in addition for these large enterprises and their procurement function specifically, to understand where the money goes, they need to understand where the CO2 footprint is. And therefore, last few months ago, we launched not spend analytics, but CO2 analytics. And this comes back also to great powers bring great responsibilities. Of course, as an individual, I need to understand my CO2 footprint and how I can reduce that. In Sievo context, I can help Sievo to be more CO2 friendly. I move from scale of 1 person to 250 persons. But since launching, we have now our first customers using this piece of software. And here we are already sort of analyzing emissions that equal to 410,000 Finns CO2 footprint. So suddenly the impact that we as Sievo can have is not an impact of 1 person or 250 persons, but it's about 400,000 persons. And this number will go up as more customers will adapt the solution. And I think this is also kind of going back to Kaisa's point. I believe this will be most substantial impact out of these examples we've made, because it is also a growing business for us. So it is a self-sustaining model that can help us to grow the business and have a positive impact on the world at the same time. And actually, I do feel the fact that we are from the Nordics gives us 1, 2, 3 years advantage compared to our competition, which is mostly US-based. So we have a product already, and now it's getting in the radar of our major US competition. The third example is in corona response analytics. I think here the moral of the story is more about how in these crisis situations you need to be agile. I do believe that global sort of economy is increasingly interconnected, plus there's the kind of nature-given sustainability challenges on top, which means that the system will be increasingly unpredictable. I believe the winner organizations, whether it's supply chain overall, are not the ones that believe that they can predict what will happen. They are the ones that can react very quickly. And this is also when the COVID hit. I was having discussions with a lot of supply chain procurement leaders, and these guys have been perfect in their procurement processes for last 10 years. But when crisis hit, what did everybody do? They throw those paper processes out of the way because they are too slow and complex to cope in such sort of rapid changing, unfolding situation. So especially under crisis, I would argue overall, where it's just too complex and fast to fit to your processes. What I believe companies can and should do instead is to kind of develop capabilities that help them to kind of manage those crisis situations. And what it means is that the companies, their supply chain functions, procurement functions, need to develop tools where they can ramp up situational awareness control centers in the matter of hours. So for example, when the COVID hit, we learned how to launch a new product over the weekend to help our customers. And I actually think it was a lot of, let's say, learnings from that COVID response analytics launch that enabled us to be super quick with the Procure for Peace, because we had figured out how to kind of create and organize a rapid response force for a rapidly unfolding situation. Also, I think sort of the moral here is that if I think of the different sort of positive impact exercises we've as Sievo done and been involved in the last years, they have taken very different shapes and forms. The CO2 analytics is a new product and part of our core strategy. I'm pretty sure if I would be discussing with investors, there would be a lot of investors who would be willing to put money on that sort of product because it is helping in the future. The corona response analytics became a temporary product or service that we winded down when the need went away. And then Procure for Peace was more disassociated from our core business, so we felt we should and it's best run as a volunteer organization, also because that way it can harness the energy of the lot of volunteers that are out there. So that's all I had for you guys today. The last commercial announcement is thank you, happy to connect to LinkedIn, and yes, we are growing rapidly, so for all the students, for all alumni, please apply. There's a lot of great positions coming up and we will accelerate our growth beyond 28% anytime soon. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Sammeli. So many things to kind of maybe go with the discussion here, but perhaps I start with the sort of a personal sort of question. So you seem to be able to find these opportunities to kind of have an impact through your own professional sort of expertise, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people are here in the room also kind of thinking about this. I was thinking when the corona hit, I was kind of, okay, what can I do? What can I do to kind of help beyond giving money? And the same situation with the war in Ukraine. So how are you able to find these opportunities?
Yeah. I think I act before I think. Because if you think, for example, how the Procure for Peace unfolded, it's not like I designed what's going to happen, but we started to communicate and exchange, and then this whole operation sort of started to emerge. So I think a lot of, let's say, Prodeko people and Tuta people overthink, how can I help? But I think if you just start to be active somehow in that crisis, in that process, it very well may be that you find the way you can contribute. I was not able to help with the medical supplies because I have no connections. The logistics supplies I was able to help in. But those opportunities only emerged as I embedded myself somehow into the action. And that's where you see the opportunities. You can't see the opportunities outside. Also, I believe sort of we as Sievo were kind of in a good position to help because we didn't have, let's say, any manufacturing or employees in Ukraine. All the organizations that actually have a footprint in Ukraine or Russia were super involved and consumed by that. We were somehow on the first row of the audience, and from there it's easy to hop in and start to contribute. It's difficult if you are interacting, it's difficult from the last row, but from first row it makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting, so you kind of follow your intuition in that sense, that to kind of find the, that's...
Yeah, because I don't think you find these opportunities through kind of analysis or analysis only. You find the opportunities when you are in the game and you have skin in the game, and then you see, okay, here's something I can add.
All right, thanks for that. So another question, perhaps this is, so I think the way in which you have worked and kind of come up with different solutions like the corona and then now the CO2 and things like that. And you mentioned about this, the world being more interconnected, so more risks, so more unpredictability. So do you see that...
Opportunities. Don't think from the risk perspective. It's always kind of supply chain procurement people as well. Where is the risk? Look at the other side of the coin. It's the opportunity there. Sorry.
Yeah, that's good. But I just wonder, like, how is Sievo, for example, already in this mode that you are able to react? And can you draw any lessons from that to other organizations? How are you prepared for all of these contingencies? Or let's say not prepared for, that you would know them beforehand, but you have the necessary agility to respond if needed.
And I think let me address that in two ways. First of all, in Sievo internally, I think it really goes back to culture and whether you trust people and whether people have to change mindset and so forth. I think good part of being a growth company is that there's so much change around all the time that people get used to that. I think maintaining that dynamics in a company that is not growing might be more difficult, but in the growth company that sort of comes quite naturally. Then the second part is how we are helping, let's say, our large enterprises to manage the supply chain crisis that they will eventually face at the increasing space. And there we feel that our role, let's say, software analytics provider, is that if there's a war in Ukraine or new geopolitical event, we can put our kind of team together who creates the solution and then provides that for our customers free of charge or immediately and so forth. And that's the way we can also, of course, make a positive impact, but also stay super relevant for our customers. And there we are well positioned because we can design that not only for specific companies' needs, but for all of those large enterprises at one go.
So as you're now working with large global companies, so do you see then differences across them as you've seen them now face different kinds of crises? And the supply chains have of course been affected. So do you see any differences? Are all the big companies similar, or do you see differences between who are able to adapt to these type of situations and who are not?
Yeah. There's definitely differences. I think it very much boils down to what kind of individuals, but also perhaps the kind of culture there is. At the one hand side, you have companies who are sort of super compliant and process-oriented, and for those I feel the change is more difficult. And then other sides you have kind of companies who perhaps have been exposed to more turbulence and change and have developed this more agile, entrepreneurial even culture, and for them it's easier to adapt.
All right. I think we have some questions in the chat as well.
Yes, actually, this is about the framework you presented. Based on the TD80 framework, TikTok and Zalando are pretty cool. Is there a risk involved in trusting these results?
I guess it depends on the teenage daughter as well. TikTok is cool, Zalando is not, if you ask my daughter. But yeah, I think sort of when it comes to the sort of decision-making framework, I guess the point is perhaps find somebody who's close to you, who has the right set of values, but doesn't care a shit about your business outcomes. And that sort of person is the right to give the feedback.
Yeah, okay. Maybe a second, a bit more interesting question.
That was a challenging one, so
a bit more formal, I guess. What do you see as cornerstones of Sievo culture? How did you achieve a common strong culture across nationalities, domain knowledge, etc.?
I think sort of when it comes to kind of culture, to some extent, it's created and emerged when the sort of company is founded. There's a small number of people, and then it's really about what sort of culture those people express, not through culture statements, but their behavior. The larger you get, the more you also need to really figure out how do you, let's say, highlight and emphasize the sides of culture that you want to kind of keep in the company. For example, for us, the transparency and honesty is a key value. So of course we need to figure out that in all occasions we kind of make everything visible and make a point about that, and then people sort of new joiners as well across cultures and backgrounds kind of can adapt that. And there's a challenge if, for example, the expectation of the hierarchy is very different for Finns versus people from Indian or Eastern Europe cultures. So how do you, let's say, train these people to embrace the what we feel is the right culture for our company at least? And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't work out, and then perhaps there's not fit between what we want to do and be and what that person wants to be.
Thank you. I'll give you a choice between a bit more of a lighthearted and a bit more of a serious question. So I have a bit more of a lighthearted question and another one that's more serious. Which do you?
Light one. I failed the previous one, so let's take
Yeah,
this.
it was very popular in the chat. Sammeli, where do you get your energy? I need the same stuff.
My superpower is that I sleep well. If sleeping would be an Olympic sport, I would be in the Finnish national team, and that's where I get the energy. So learn to sleep.
Okay, I can take the serious question as well. How did these responsibility initiatives contribute to your growth?
I think that's partly. I'm the least KPI-driven CEO that you can find in this country, I presume. I don't believe that everything that's important can be measured, and I don't believe that everything that can be measured is important. There's things that you can measure and should measure. How did Procure for Peace contribute to our growth? I have no clue, and I don't care. How did the Corona Response Analytics contribute to our growth? It probably has some kind of impact. Can I measure it? Absolutely not. The CO2 analytics, that is becoming a solid product, that impact we can measure and should measure and so forth. But I think also, at the philosophical level, I think if you do a good deed, that will get back to you in one shape or form. If we wouldn't be doing Procure for Peace, I wouldn't be here advertising Sievo and the great culture we have. So in a way, it's coming back already. Did I design for it? Can I measure it? Absolutely not.
Yeah, thank you. I'll give it back to Jukka.
Yeah, maybe just a reaction to this, that of course you might see this sort of, you see the positive return later on. Perhaps, I don't know, kind of you personally well enough to kind of say it, but it might be difficult to kind of spot this kind of opportunity if you right away try to think about what's going to be in it for me down the road.
Exactly. I completely agree.
All right. Thank you very much, Sammeli.